Hello, welcome back to our channel, Integrative Approaches in Healthier Living. I'm Tami here with Coach Chris Bush. Today we're going to be talking about food sensitivity test results, my test results specifically, right? Hi, Chris, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Tami. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited for this conversation. We've been talking about revealing test results for what seems like quite some time now, and much to my surprise, when I was reviewing my notes for today, it has been 3 years since my first test,
Yep. It's been a
March
while.
of 22. And you've been with me on this whole entire journey since then and before, right?
Yes, I have.
Well, do you have anything you'd like to add before I jump in? Where your thoughts?
Honestly, that today, as we discussed before, I really wanted you to kind of just not spin your wheels, but just, drive forward with this because, I mean, you've really headed this journey on yourself, like in a lot of ways. 3 years ago, it's whenever, like the first test was done. Just had a second test, which we did a short on a couple months ago. That was eye-opening as well because that actually brought up some sensitivities and some food items that some that you caught on your own that weren't part of your initial screening, and some that we've discovered along the way that were really low items on your initial screening. And from work with your dietitian and such, we discovered even though those were low items, they were in, I guess, what we would say copious or lots of food that you had been eating and you were completely unaware about it.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's some of the things that I want to unpack today because, in conversations with other people and questions from some of the viewers, it's you so you see a food item on a list and you're like, oh, okay, I don't eat X, I don't eat greens, I don't eat beans, I don't eat whatever.
Right.
And but there's more to it. There's a lot more that you have to uncover to make sure that it's not in something that you're eating and you're just not aware that it is.
Right.
Or it's a family thereof, like a whole family of tree nuts, right? And things like that. So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I myself, I've worked with people's sensitivities, and as we got into this conversation, also, people with other things that they're trying to stay away from. And yeah, it's just kind of wild whenever you start to dig on the ingredients and where things are processed and how things can easily become cross-contaminated or things can be, in things that you didn't suspect because they don't need to be listed on the ingredient list. Yeah, absolutely. It can be an adventure.
yeah, for sure. For sure. So to dive right into my first set of test results from March of 22, it was so that's the one that the my physician suggested I have done. And it was a lab order, so I had to go to a physical laboratory to have the blood draw. And it is IgG test results for those that might be curious and want to know. But yeah, so IgG and I was and this particular test breaks it down from high, moderate, low to very low and then none detected. But on my high list, I had cashews, pistachios, sunflower seeds, and dill. And then I went to my moderate list, which was almond and vanilla. And then my low was coconut, garlic, nutmeg, plum, and shrimp. So, and then I had a whole list of things in the very low department. So the idea is they say you should, think about doing an elimination diet, right? And take the things off out of your diet, and for me it was, I kind of started with pretty much the whole list because the majority of what was even in the very low I was consuming every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the best that I could to try to eliminate everything. But I think one of the tips for me that worked the best was to eliminate, just cross off the list anything that I knew I already did not eat.
Right.
So then it just kind of like gave me a more freer feeling. It wasn't as a daunting of a report, right? Because I already know I don't eat mushrooms, so no big deal. I
Just get
don't eat
everything out of the way.
alfalfas, no big deal. So clean those things off the list, and it was easier to it's bite-sized bits, taking things that way. And for my high list, I don't typically eat dill. I guess I was eating dill indirectly, dill pickles, right? So that's kind of, one of those, I want to say, hidden areas where you're like, oh, I don't eat fresh dill, no big deal. But are you eating the dill pickles, for example? So, you know, but yeah, so that was how I started. And once I got through knocking everything off the list that was not even in my diet to begin with, then I said, good golly, Miss Molly, what the heck do I eat now? Because as you very well recall, at that time I was eating lots of nuts and seeds, right? I had to
Yep.
have to eat a high fat diet. So my snacks were the nuts, right? They say nuts are healthy and they have the good fats and all of that lovely stuff. But then when I was like, holy cows, I can't eat this. What do I do? It was difficult. It was a big pill to swallow, and I swallow a lot of pills. And I was like, oh my, oh my. However, I will say, and I know you can attest to this, once I started eliminating those things from my diet, the fog started to lift, energy started coming back into my little world.
Yes.
And
Yeah, you definitely felt immensely better whenever you were on the, yeah,
yeah,
got into
yeah.
the,
And the inflammation, I think when we have these IgG or inflammatory responses in our body, we don't really realize the true impact until we don't have them affecting us anymore.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have like this, well, this is definitely the case. We definitely have I would describe as a subjective viewpoint. And it's always based on, you know, our presence, yeah, a
Hmm.
lot of the time. People that are suffering sometimes that, it's kind of like we've all heard that terminology or that kind of that analogy of the frog in the boiling water. And, so some of these things creep up on us over time through our life, especially I see this commonly where people might have not been dealing with food sensitivity, or at least they were completely unaware of them in their 20s.
Hmm.
Then they get more severe for the same things whenever they hit their 30s. And later in the 30s, they really, generally speaking, where I have a lot of clients that start noticing this, right? Like right in later 30s, for whatever reason, going into 40s, for men and women both, seems to be a really hot zone for when people really start noticing the impact of food sensitivity. But they don't realize that's what it is. And oftentimes, um, like the food sensitivities have gotten quite severe where like, oh, like I just don't feel like the same as I used to. And they'll go on, say, like an elimination diet like yourself, and it's like, oh, bam, all of a sudden they feel a lot better whenever they get these things out of their diet. Why? Because subjectively, they were used to the suffering. And when they got those things out of their diet and that cloud was lifted, that energy returned, they noticed like how much worse they were feeling.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And for me, especially, and I'm sure there's others out there like that, that we're not correlating how we're feeling to food
Oh,
or
absolutely.
food sensitivity, right? It's not the first thing that pops onto our top 10 list of what our issue might be, and especially if we do the internet searches in the world, and you type in there whatever, it's like, whoo, doomsday as to whatever it is that's causing our problems or our issues or our concerns.
Right.
And
Yeah, there's usually an
reality is
extremism.
it
You're right.
it could be food, right? It could
Yeah,
very well be our food.
absolutely.
So yeah, it's just interesting. So to continue, I had a lot of things on the first list that I had to eliminate that I was like, I just don't even know. Black pepper and garlic and,
Right.
things that I was enjoying and had enjoyed my entire life. And then fast forward to the summer of 2023, I started going like backwards and I'm thinking, what on earth is wrong with me? Why am I still feeling ugh? And again, my brain went to maybe it's my lungs, maybe I'm not doing well, maybe it's COVID, took a COVID test. No, that wasn't it. And so I went back to the drawing board, so to speak, and I looked at this list that I had it hanging on my refrigerator for a quick reference, is where I placed a copy of my list so that I could remember, oh, is this on my list? I'm not sure, especially if it was some random ingredient, right? So I went back to the refrigerator and I looked at this list and I stood there very intentionally and I said, please show me what I am missing on this list that is making me still feel like crap. And yeast jumped off the page and hit me over the head. And I remember very vividly thinking when I even initially saw yeast on the list, and mind you, this was a very low category, right? So it should
I
have like not even
remember.
been a major thing.
Yeah, yeah, I remember when you just
Yes, yes. So
mentioned. Yeah.
when I saw yeast, I went, "Oh, no problem. I don't eat bread." Right? No big deal. Cut the bread out. Well, yeah, that didn't work out very well for me,
Oh,
did it?
yeah, yeah. I think this is right around the time too, whenever you brought that, we kind of sought the assistance of like a dietitian, or you
I
were
did.
talking to a dietitian at that point.
I did.
Yeah,
I
but
did.
you want to like tell the viewers like where the yeast can be found in?
I do because it's very surprising, especially for people that it's not on their radar.
Right,
So, needless to say, as you mentioned, I sought the assistance of a registered dietitian and said, I need help. I'm struggling, and I did some of my own research that I am very capable of doing. And before I talk about what the dietitian told me, it was when I started researching yeast and where it can be found, it was, vinegars and soys and soy sauces and fermented foods. So no sauerkraut, no kimchi, none of those things. And I was like, holy cows, I wasn't thinking of vinegar like that. Salad dressings, they have vinegar in them.
right.
And just in a wide variety it's in a lot of foods, especially in the US. I can't speak to other countries because I've not checked their
But
food
yeast is
ingredients.
in a lot of food everywhere. It's just such
I
a
mean,
common
even things people don't think about, but like stocks, chicken stock, beef stock, whether it's already bottled or if it's the little cubes or the powders or whatever, it has yeast
here's another one.
extract.
We just talked about it. Fruit that sat in your refrigerator for too long.
Yes, 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 yes.
So,
So the dietitian clued me in on yeast and she said, I don't know if you do food prep for the week, but you can't do that anymore. And
right.
I was like, oh, okay. And she said, you probably can't even do leftovers because when you cook a meal and then you store it in the refrigerator, airtight tight container, whatever, it starts to grow the yeast or the molds or whatever on it overnight, and it could negatively impact you. And then
Yeah.
to your point, the fruits, because there's a sweetness and that feeds the yeast, and we
Yeah.
could probably talk 2 hours on the whole yeast component, but
Right.
definitely if I even eating a whole nectarine or peach or something like that,
Right.
too sweet, it feeds that yeast and the bacteria, and it is not fun. makes
Yeah.
makes me feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So and then another thing I had to think about that the dietitian mentioned to me was, your supplements. What are your
Yeah.
vitamins containing in it? especially because, on my list was broccoli and apples and bananas. And, so
Right.
if you're doing a more like
Absolutely.
wholesome, you think it's a wholesome vitamin or mineral supplement of some sort for whatever it is that you're doing, just be mindful that, what does your list present and what are you consuming in other places that you might not think about.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah. And then I just want to fast forward to my more current test, which came back with a lot of the same things that I was consuming. I mean, were resulted and revealed on my first test. But I found it interesting that I went from, a very low in the yeast department to this new test brought me up into, and it has a little bit different threshold. This is the one that I did with York test that we did the short video on, and you can order it online and do it yourself. But it brought me up to borderline. I'm smack dab in the middle between a high reactivity and a normal sensitivity. It's like, no, it's definitely up there. And the other one that I find fascinating that's still really high for me is obviously the my nuts, but dill. And I'm not a dill consumer, and I haven't had dill in years. So I guess
Well,
I'm going to make sure I don't eat dill.
yeah, but I think like there's one thing that we failed to mention in this, and is that in the scientific community, in the medical community, there's this general consensus a lot of the times that whenever you have something that you're sensitive to, and if you do an elimination diet, and I honestly I do not know where this comes from. I will say this is not research based, but I have encountered this so many times with different doctors and different dietitians. But if you stay away from something for a period of time, you eliminate it from your diet, and then you can slowly reintegrate it back in. I have never found this. I have I have heard this from countless doctors and countless dietitians. None of my clients have been so fortunate as to do an elimination diet and be able to start implementing foods back in that way.
Well, that is wonderful to hear from the standpoint that that is me. Like, and that's what the doctor said originally. Ideally, theoretically, you can eliminate these things for, X number of months and then
Right.
slowly incorporate them back into your diet. And what I found was, no, it's on the list and it seems to be on the list. So I try
Yes.
to just not even go there. So
The
yeah.
interesting thing is usually what I find is the exact opposite is true. It's like people are sensitive to something when they stop eating it, like they become more sensitive to it. Like it's like usually that's what I've found with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the most
Yeah.
common.
And real quick, I want to throw in here because we mentioned this earlier. A couple of the things that I discovered on my own, and then this test confirmed was coffee. Right,
Yeah.
coffee appeared on this list for me, and I had happened to have a cup of. I made iced coffee. It was a half and half coffee, half calf, no calf. Um, and it wiped me out for like I just was no energy, nothing. And some research that I found, recently indicated that when you have a reaction, it can hit you pretty quick, which it does for me. But then it'll last anywhere from 4 to 12 hours, whatever the symptoms is. And when something hits me really hard, like the coffee did that day, and this has been my experience with other items also, it's literally 4 hours before my body clears it and I feel better. So when I read that research, I was like, wow, that is fascinating because I just thought that's weird, just random. But I guess there's some science and some research behind it that says 4 to 12 hours. I'm grateful it's four, knowing it can last longer.
Yes.
And yeah, but so coffee and tea, and in more research that I did, I learned that coffees, and I'm sure probably teas, can be processed with yeasts and molds. So unless you're buying something that specifically says no mold, no yeast. So back to the point that yeast is found everywhere. Yes, it really is.
Absolutely. Yeah, interesting on that note too is like I know you and I discussed this is rebaking your beans, like buying your beans in full form and rebaking them, like putting them in. And this, by the way, like this is because yeast is often found a lot, by the way, on peanuts. Uh, I have somebody that I'm working with right now that a little bit of like yeast sensitivity, and they bake like their peanuts, because they love peanuts. So to make sure that kills that off. So, but you can do the same thing with coffee beans. Real quick too, because we didn't really touch on this much, but I really, because of you did such an amazing job and diligently have been a great food tracker, for, well, I mean, if I look at your data, I don't think you've missed a day in over 3 years completely that you haven't went back and retouched. But I want to call that out because it has been such an amazing tool for you. Yes, it is a responsibility, but it has allowed you to go back through and look at the foods that you have eaten, and, look at your energy levels and be able to really pick out some of these things because I was actually really impressed when you got your new results and heard some of the things that the test results, and I was like, well, we already knew that. We already knew that. Why did we already know it? Because Tami already knew it. Because Tami was tracking her food and she was paying attention, and she would notice her energy levels, and she would go back into her journal, and she'd be like, oh, okay, I had this, I had that, and I think that's so cool.
Yeah. 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 It is a valuable tool, an invaluable tool at that. So, and it does take a minute to, put that data in there. And then if we go back even so far to before the first test, I was doing a lot of overnight oats, right? Putting all of the ingredients in the little mason jar thing, putting it in the fridge and having a quote healthy breakfast, right? Except then when I came back and I couldn't have cinnamon and I'm not supposed to eat vanilla, which was really high on my list, and I was putting all of those ingredients. I remember you telling me, you're like, whoa, Tami, how are you keeping up? There's a lot of stuff in there. And I'm like, yeah. But I had the recipe, I knew what I was doing and entered that. And I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Now I know why I'm not eating overnight oats because can't put the cinnamon in it, can't put the good stuff, all of that. But yeah. And not tracking, I wouldn't have really been able to like identify that as quickly as I did. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Well, you got anything else? Because
Yes, I just wanna finish up with just a couple of quickie notes. I think next time I'd really like to talk about tips and tricks and lessons learned in this journey and maybe help provide some tips and tools for others that are listening or know of somebody that might be dealing with a similar situation. It's critically important to work with a medical professional, a doctor, a registered dietitian, somebody who is knowledgeable in these areas. And for anybody that may need help trying to find somebody to do this with or for them, to please reach out. Don't hesitate. Message, send a smoke signal, however that works for you. And we will be there to retrieve it and help guide you and get you feeling better and on a great health journey.
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, it goes good.
Bueno. Thank you. To everybody listening or watching, we would love if you would, if this resonates with you, if you found anything of assistance for you or a family or a friend, like, share, subscribe, or follow our channel. It helps us, and we just want to continue to help you. So, with much gratitude, thank you for tuning in each and every time that you do. I'm here for you. Coach Chris is here for you. Be well.
See you guys.